And answer your questions live. Call now 1-800-808-5548. And now, the Real Estate Rat Pack.
Welcome to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. And let me tell you, we have a great-looking group of guys in here this morning. For once, the Real Estate Rat Pack has come dressed to impress. Right, Rob?
We are dressed to impress, and we're going to go help a friend of ours open up a new project up in the Conaway area. You want to tell them about that?
We know it's a really neat project up in the Conaway area called Playa Vista. In fact, we're all going to be up there in a uniform is the best way to say it. And let me tell you, they're doing a grand, best way to say it, right? They're doing a very grand opening up there. It's in the Conaway area. It's for families and individuals who are looking at buying an investment property, a second home, or even a place to live up in the Conaway area right across the bridge right there. It's absolutely gorgeous. Playa Vista.
I just thought Rob said he had to stop off and see his probation officer.
Well, along the way, I think.
Well, also, if you want to see us live and in person, you can go up between 11 and 4. They're having a grand opening today. So we will be there with our tuxedos and ties, and so come by and say hi.
Absolutely. And that's Playa Vista up in the Conroe area. It's a great activity going on today. Bring your family out there and see a great piece of property, let me tell you.
Tux and ties with the Rat Pack guys.
I like it.
Oh!
And it rhymes.
That's why I make the big bucks.
And you know, Rob, we got some great guests you brought in the studio today.
I did, and I'm very honored to have Danny Frank was on our first show, and he is the chairman of the Houston Association of Realtors. Welcome back, Danny.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I am also truly honored to have a mentor of mine for about the last 14 or 15 years is Jeremy Conaway. He's president of RECON. He has been Houston Association of Realtors strategist for probably 15, 16 years. Is that right?
Yep.
Welcome to the studio. Let me give you some information about him. This man is admired across the planet. He is currently featured in 34 industry publications each month. He works for real estate firms across North America, Asia, in 6 countries. And in 2011, it says here you traveled 217,000 miles. Is that correct?
That's the way I stay married, is just by being gone.
She pays them, huh? Anyway, and so it works with 32 of the top realtor associations in the country. And I'll just give you kind of a list here. Houston Association of Realtors, which is one of the largest associations in the country. The Pinnacle Group, which is 46 realtor associations. Daimler North American, Industry Group of Canada. I mean, the list goes on and on. And we are truly honored to have somebody. He's a great strategist and a kind of a futurist as well. So,
really? Welcome,
Jeremy.
Well, I thought I was a futurist this morning. I showed up here and I thought people were like doing job interviews for waiters. Everyone had a tuxedo. I thought, oh my God, I'm underdressed again.
Well, I remember what George Gorbel said a long time ago. Do you ever think the whole world is a tuxedo when you're a pair of brown shoes?
Yeah, that's right.
You feeling kind of like that?
We have got to be the only people that are on the air at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning in tuxedos.
That's
in
right.
tuxedos.
That's right.
And I have to admit, though, I actually had to switch out this morning. I had an accident. So I'm actually more in just a formal dress. But let me tell you, we're still going to look equally good out there today.
Well, Chris's son thought that his chocolate milk would go very well with his tux.
That's what's on his tie. I was wondering. Interesting pattern.
Absolutely. And having Jeremy here, Jeremy has a great perspective because Jeremy goes around the nation and talks with different associations, but he also gets insight into what trends and things are happening in those markets. So I would like for you to talk briefly about what you see in Houston, and let's talk about some of the things we were talking about earlier today.
Well, what's interesting to me is that as you travel around the country, that you hear this kind of theme, now's a good time to buy. But interestingly enough, Houston is probably one of the top 5 markets in the country where it is a great time to buy. You go back over the last 8 years, and most of the rest of the country's real estate markets have gone up and crashed down. There's been lots of flames. It's been horrible. But the Houston market, interestingly enough, has this, for whatever reason, this essential internal control. It only goes up so far, and it only goes down so far, and it really is an adult marketplace. And so this is probably one of the few places in the country where it is really safe right now and really a positive time to buy. It's going back up again, but it's not going to go through the skies.
Yeah, we never had a boom, so we didn't have a bust. Exactly.
Yeah, which is really, at this point, what you really want is stability.
Yeah,
and we've got it here.
And some of the trends I've seen in Houston, of course, is our issue is inventory. And someone was telling me the other day, in Katy, Texas, we have 0.7 months. And that means if they don't get a new home on the market in 20 days, they're out of business. I've never even heard of a statistic like that. What are you seeing in areas like you were talking about Las Vegas and some other markets that you visit?
Put that number in perspective for us.
Okay. Well, Now, I just returned from a national meeting of the top 270 brokers in the United States. So one of the things we talked about, as long as we had everybody there, is we ran some surveys. It was interesting. In about 20% of the markets, there was like a 2-month inventory, but the average inventory was something in the neighborhood of 4 months. The fact is, the inventory is really low right now. Some interesting factors. Now, the other inventory we talked about, of course, is the ghost inventory. Those are the homes that are subject to, in which people have defaulted at some point in the last 3 or 4 years. And those numbers are interesting. In the Los Angeles area right now, there's some 32,000 homes occupied by individuals who are technically foreclosed upon, but the bank hasn't followed up on it. So they're just living in homes in which they haven't made a payment in 2 or 3 years. In Phoenix, the number is 50,000, and in Las Vegas, literally, it's 60,000 households are living in homes that they have not made payments on in excess of 2 years. Now, you can look at that from a sociological, economic, a whole bunch of things, but the good thing is that what it tells us is the strength of the American real estate industry and the real estate marketplace is such that banks have essentially said, look, let's not destabilize this thing any longer. Let's get it stabilized. Everybody in this industry right now is driving toward let's get started on the next cycle. And that's the neat thing about Houston is Houston is already into this cycle. It's already stabilized. Other communities are trying to reach this point of stabilization. And one of the things banks are coming to grips with is this foreclosure thing sure looks good to our attorneys, but it doesn't look good to our accountants.
And you're right there. One of the things you mentioned, I always like to point this out, is we're seeing a lot of that ghost inventory that's out there, as you mentioned, or shadow inventory, some people refer it to. But one of the things is that with the new regulations that's come across over the past couple of years, it's caused banks to look at things, especially when it comes to foreclosure, a bit different. Because what they have to do now is when they do a foreclosure and they bring that back on their books, they don't want to have that inventory right now sitting. There's the implication of maintenance and of everything else associated with having that inventory out there.
This is Danny. In Houston, we're seeing a really low margin of foreclosures right now, but we're seeing a bigger tick of short sales. So the banks have really figured out they don't want to foreclose. They would rather sell it for something and get something back out of the deal than go through the legal process of a foreclosure. So they're letting the people stay in the houses, and they're still not motivated to do those short sales very much either. So there's a kind of a catch-22 there between different foreclosed on and having the short sale completed. So there's a great amount of that shadow inventory out there that people are just really willing to live in the house and not have to pay for it right now. And that's, for me, that's not a good thing. You know, we have to really think about where this economy is going, and is it a false economy that's booming, or is it really going? And I don't know what those numbers are here in Houston, Jeremy, you know, with the total number of houses that have people living in them, but I would suggest they're probably growing.
Well, it is, but it's still amazingly low compared to anywhere in the country. You know, we're talking about a few people who have a cold. We're talking about in other cities people who have pneumonia. Right, I mean, this. So it's interesting that you talk about the mortgage thing, because if you're a consumer right now and you're listening to this show and you're listening to other shows and you're going out on the internet, one of the things you're going to start hearing is this concept of, well, the mortgage world is really turning up. You know, we got these new regulations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I don't get another chance to say this, first of all, don't listen to this.
Thank you.
This is basically your mother saying, you know, there are consequences, my son. The fact is there is mortgage money, there's mortgage opportunity, but the need to be associated professionally with somebody who understands right now the mortgage jungle, if you will, is especially complicated. And there's going to be a lot of people out there, including mortgage people, who don't know how to play it.
You know, and I'm glad you said that, by the way, because one of the things that we hear all the time is you hear, we still have consumers coming us today. Danny and I work on a lot of deals together. Can I get a home today? Is there still money available? I hear it's impossible to get qualified for a loan. I hear if I don't buy this year, next year I won't be able to get into a home, right? And so one of the things, don't get me wrong, I encourage everybody, right now is a great time to buy real estate. But I also, as you mentioned, tell everybody is don't listen to a lot of the nonsense that is sometimes given out there. Does regulation happen? Absolutely. Are there some things we don't know what's going to go on or how it's going to ultimately be defined? Absolutely. The real estate market in this nation is what's always driven our growth. And we're not going to do anything still to going forward to inhibit that or to allow the real estate market not to grow. And there is money available today. Absolutely. There is lending going on today. What has happened, though, is that now we want a little bit of skin in the game, right? So individuals who are looking at buying homes, they have to at least be able to put a little bit of skin in the game, 3%, 3.5% down, depending on the loan type you're doing. And they also have to know that there's more qualification requirements to ensure that they are good mortgages, good ability to repay the mortgages. That does not mean, though, that money's not out there. Trust me, there's plenty of deals going on. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of deals going on, and they're all getting financing today.
Now, what's interesting, this conversation sort of reflects what we're seeing nationally. So what you didn't talk about with all the good news about mortgages, and for those of us who just are slightly over 45, who remember back in 1979, coming out of our closing, we'd just gotten out of law school, we were excited, and it's our first house, and we come out of that closing having signed with a smile on our face a 13.5% mortgage, thinking, yes. Now, you'll notice this conversation we just had. You didn't say one word about the most amazing thing of all.
Which is rates, let me tell you.
They're non-existent.
Right. We tell everybody we're in that perfect storm right now, right? Yeah. You've got incredible inventory still available, and while there are multiple bid situations, we still have availability of homes. But you also have financing right now that is the lowest we have ever seen. Whether you are looking at buying a home or you're looking at refinancing your home, you're probably never going to get back to an average 15-year rate, 2.75, an average 30-year fix, 3.5, or an FHA at 3.25. We're not going to see that money back any time after this goes away soon. It is the perfect time to look into that because, as you mentioned, rates are a big part of what can drive down your ability to buy a little bit slightly bigger home with a lot lower payment.
This would be a great segue to talk about some things we talked about earlier today also, is that we've got the QRM, which is about the Frank-Dodd Act, and the Frank-Dodd Act was not all enacted at one time. They're easing us into it, but now they're looking at a lot of the features of it. Jeremy, talk about the QRM a little bit.
Okay, well, let's first of all put it in perspective. I just spent a couple of hours with the fellow who runs the Harvard University Housing Center, which is a joint venture of the Kennedy School. And so what happens is that he said you have to start this discussion by understanding that in 2006, the mortgage industry was promiscuous, and literally out of control. And so now what's happening is that all they're doing is getting back in control. So don't be afraid about the fact that, you got to have documents now. You got to have a credit score, for heaven's sakes. You got to have some paperwork. I mean, it's like...
And a little bit of money.
Yeah, but
the horror.
No, but interesting.
And a good credit score.
What? A friend of mine's son is closing in California last week. You got a 5% down. There's still things available.
Absolutely.
Don't listen to this idea that suddenly there's this guard at the gate, and unless you haul out a duffel bag full of money.
The money is available for people who are qualified.
Yes.
And there's no reason to wait. Now's a great time to buy a house in Houston, Texas.
Joe, I see you down there ready to say something.
Well, there's so many points that he's already touched on that are interesting to me because I come from a different spin on the credit side of it. Y'all were talking about shadow inventory, and that there are folks out there who experienced what they felt was a foreclosure. But in truth, they didn't. I have
what? A foreclosurette.
Yes, they come to us and they're like, "Yeah, I had a foreclosure several years ago, and the loan officer said I can't qualify for a loan." And we start looking at their credit, and they have a mortgage that was just eternally reported as 180 days late. Forever, it was never foreclosed on. 3 years ago, it's still reporting 180 days late. Anyway, we're up against a break.
We absolutely are. And, we want to hear from you. If you have any questions, give us a call, 800-808-5548. We got some great guests in the studio. We're coming up against a break right now, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we are back. We're having a great conversation here. I tell you, one of the things we left off with, we were talking about the mortgage industry being promiscuous in 2006. Had a hard time on that one. But I will tell you the one thing that we have seen, and this is the one thing I think has been really good, is that we have seen a lot of regulation come in the mortgage business that has allowed us now to do a couple of things. Number one is loan officers who are still available are the professional ones who are now licensed, who go through their ongoing education and training. And a lot of the companies that are still around nowadays, I will tell you, were the ones who were still doing good business back in 2006, 2005, 2004. And in the other side of things, and this is something that I've always, sort of like my little box that I get on and talk about, is the industry wanted to blame somebody for what went on. Congress wanted to blame somebody for what went on. The government wanted to blame somebody, and the lowest hanging fruit in the real estate ladder was the mortgage industry. I hate to say it, but it was the lowest hanging fruit. There were plenty of times that clients would come into my office. I would sit down with them and say, you don't qualify to buy a loan today. And 30 days later, they would go with someone else, knowing that that was their decision, and make that purchase. Right. And the one thing I always say is it takes two sides to tango, right? It takes a partner to dance. And so the fact is that the blame went on such a low-hanging fruit, I still think doesn't represent the fact that there were a lot of individuals out there who knew what they were doing, and then when it came down to it, it was an easy finger-pointing right there. And I don't think that was fair either. But I do like all the changes that the mortgage industry has done. I like the down payment requirements. I like the licensing requirements. I like the fact that the companies that are still around are the strongest ones that are available today.
Absolutely. And people do have a choice, and there is a lot of money out there. And so briefly, on the QRM, we talked about things that are happening in Congress, which is always a big issue with me, is legislatively what's happening, how is it going to impact the buying consumer out there. They're talking about, of course, it's going as much as 20% down on every transaction. Yeah, I felt the same way. And so
the listeners couldn't see that facial expression.
It was
one of pain,
a grimace, or Diet Coke talking back to him. Do you see something like this actually happening? I know we're going to be in Washington in 2 weeks to
let's
talk about it.
Respect the consumers who are listening to give them a little bit of background. Okay, what's happening is that during this year, it's like anything else. You know, you have a neighborhood in which people drive 50 miles an hour in a 25-mile zone. Nobody notices until one day someone runs over a grandmother taking their kid for a walk. And for the next week or two, what you see is a radar trap out in front. And you have this immediate enforcement, but then 2 weeks after that, it's all back to 50 miles an hour. That's what's happened here, is that there was a problem. Congress has taken 2 years to take a look at it. What are we going to do? And everybody's weighed in on it. And then they passed this bill. So what you're going to see over the next year is we're trying to figure out how to regulate this thing, and we're going to over-regulate it for the next 18 months. Remember, mortgage is not a patriotic activity. It's not a political activity. It's an economic activity. The purpose of the mortgage industry is to produce profitability like every other industry, and what we'll find now is we'll go a little too far over the next year, and then we'll come back and we'll find the perfect balance again. During the meantime, there's going to be mortgages. It's going to be just fine because no one's saying, gee, let's put all the mortgage people out of work. That's not going to happen. So I think that I go back to this thing that you really need. I know that many consumers out there think, well, I don't need anybody. I can do this all by myself. You may be able to find that home. You're able to do lots of stuff about that. But when it comes to the financial side, you're really going to have to focus on working with people who understand that for the next 12 months, every morning, the mortgage industry is going to get up, open its mail, and have a new world. Every morning for 365 mornings. And so everyone's going to be feeling their way through it. So you better be with somebody who understands how to ride a trail that's never been ridden before. And that's going to be the secret. But there will be mortgages. It's a huge industry, and there's a lot of very successful people.
And real estate will lead the market out of any recession. It always has, always will. And
because we're motivated. That's what we do in America.
So what would the 20% down payment do to the real estate market as we know it today? If that were to come into effect tomorrow, would it absolutely stop real estate market as we know it right now?
Well, I don't want to be that dramatic. But bottom line is my 26-year-old son,
Chris does,
and his household, which includes two newly minted lawyers who are trying to work their way. It's going to be some period of time before they've got so that's just not going to happen.
Right.
But you're going to hear about that, and it's going to scare the heck out of consumers. Well, I'll never have a house. Listen, the whole world wants you to have a house. I mean, okay, regulators want you to have a house. The Congress wants you to have a house. That's how America works.
Right. You know, Danny, I could probably answer that question, as you mentioned right there, is probably the best way. If I look at our market today, if I look at the amount of mortgages that we generate as a company quite a bit. About 50% of our mortgages that we generate today are with 20% down.
Really?
About 50% of them. Now, don't get me wrong. If I segment out what levels of homes those are in, you're going to see that the higher-priced homes have a larger percentage of down payment than the lower-priced homes. Right. That's always been the tradition right here.
So the first-time home buyer would be dramatically
impacted. So that's really, I mean, if I look at it from a realistic perspective, 50% of the business that I personally do would be impacted if a 20% mandatory down payment was required. Now, with that being said, is that the other thing that we're seeing is individuals who are putting less money down. Right now, they're really putting less money down because of where interest rates are. They're saying, why put 20% down whenever I can do 5% down and still get the best interest rate?
It's almost free money.
That is correct. So, unfortunately, it's one of those things is, again, it has a lot to do with the real estate area in which they're buying. And it has to do with also their personal financial situation. A lot of people right now want to keep the cash. They want to keep it for other investments, other initiatives, other items that they've got coming up in their life.
Speaking of cash, interesting enough, Eric, the guy from Harvard University, reported that 30% of transactions right now are for cash.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, put that in your perspective. Cash, where does that come from? Well, it's just the nature of the market right now.
I have 26 contracts pending right now, and they're all cash, every one of them.
Well, you might also mention that's one person.
That's one person, but
But a lovable one person.
a lovable one person, absolutely.
Danny's new
Hey,
best
let me
friend,
tell you,
actually.
there's not a realtor out there that wouldn't take 26 contracts in cash any day of the week.
He'll buy as many as we can find. So. It's all for
And
the
that's
rental
interesting you
market.
should say that and talking about that, Danny, is that your investor, and I have not met your investor, but obviously he
You
sees
won't.
I was going to say, right now there's hundreds of realtors listening going, please say the name, please say the name.
He's on a yacht in Galveston Bay under guard, right?
So he chose this time to come into Houston to
Right.
purchase. I'm sure he had some logic, some rationale.
Well, right now there's a bunch of hedge fund companies out there looking for investment deals. Dr. Ted Jones said, from the chief economist for Stuart Title, said last year that if you were to buy $100,000 worth of gold 20 years ago and $100,000 worth of real estate 20 years ago, which one would be worth more money?
Real estate.
Real estate wins every time. And what can you do with your gold? You get to dust it off. You get to look at it and play. You can't do anything with it. It just kind of sits there.
I've got it all in this one cufflink.
Yeah, there
actually.
you go. So, but in real estate, you can live in it. You can do things with it. You can
Rent it.
You can make money from it, and you can do lots of different things with real estate. So, real estate is really a great long-term investment for anybody.
You know, and you mentioned the renting. I think that's one of the big things you talked
It
about.
is.
You can't rent gold out. You sell gold, and it gets turned into something else. But on a home, you can actually rent that out. You can cash flow off of it. You can grow your equity position over a period of time, depending on appreciation. So there's definitely, there's never been a better investment vehicle, as you mentioned, than real estate.
Right.
Jeremy, you're percolating there.
Oh, no, I was just, because I think it's interesting to talk about. You hear a lot in the news and the media about foreign investors. And everyone thinks, well, foreign investors are doing this just because, the prices are so cheap. And actually, that's not it. You have many countries around the world who are now creating entire generations of millionaires and billionaires. And what's interesting when you get that kind of money is, where do you put it? So used to you could put it in a Swiss bank account. Well, we all understand that the transparency has reached that. In many of those countries, you can't invest theirs because of political instability. What's interesting is that in all the world, people who have lots of money recognize that the single safest investment in the world is American real estate. And when you come to, and the statement you make when you come to Houston is, all right, I could go to Las Vegas, I could roll the dice or buy some real estate there and hope it comes out. I can come to Houston, Texas, and I know it's a stable market. I am not going to lose it here. And so the decision of a foreign investor to invest in this community is one of safety, it's one of stability, and consumers ought to take a look at that and go, wow, if people with billions of dollars who are trying to figure out are coming to Houston, there's no better statement because these people do levels of research that we never even dreamed of.
When you go to other countries and you consult and strategize with other industry leaders and things like that, what do they say about America?
Oh, no, well, again, you can only have this conversation if you're sitting in Jakarta. Okay, we work in Indonesia. You're sitting in Jakarta, you're looking out the window, and you're going, wow, look at this confusion. The worst real estate market in the United States is amazingly stable compared to that. I mean, you just can't. No government official is going to come grab your house away from you, unless it's the IRS. But that's not going to happen. So that's what I think Danny's talking about, is that it really is. Despite all the great news stories we've generated over the past several years, it's an amazingly stable place.
I go back to a book that I read a long time ago, and I still love it today, which is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the Rich Dad, Poor Dad concept, right, and you look at what's going on with the world's billionaires and them, guess what you always read about every week, every day, about a new investment that the children or the parents are making? What is it? Real estate.
Right.
They're investing in some. Now, don't get me wrong, it's hundreds of millions of dollars in an estate somewhere, but still, it's real estate investment. And so you look back at that philosophy, and it just goes to show you that is the way wealth creation is still created. It's the number one vehicle to create wealth. And the United States is still the greatest vehicle to make that happen when you look at a real estate market.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Or that
Rob, you just gone quiet on me.
that was one of those pregnant pauses.
We are professionals. Please don't try this at home.
Exactly. Anyway, you were talking earlier. Your son's buying a home.
No, my son wants to buy a home.
Wants to buy a home.
Yeah.
Okay, And we have somebody who has come and spoken to us, a gentleman named Rob Hahn, and he was talking about the rental generation. The kids are coming out of school, they have college debt and things like that. And what do you say about that? This new generation doesn't want a home?
All right, real quick. Again, the Harvard University study's definitive research says, look, people came to this country in the 1800s and the early 1900s because they wanted to own property. Property ownership is an inherent part of the American culture. 8 years of bad mortgages hasn't changed that. My son was raised in a home. He wants to raise his children in a home. Home ownership is not an endangered species. It's just had a rough time.
I would absolutely agree with you. And, one of the things we mentioned is, and I think this is the biggest thing, home ownership is still the number one dream and goal for most U.S. citizens who come here. If you talk to a lot of immigrants who come here, if you talk to an average American who's here, that is what they want to see. We're going to continue this conversation right after our break coming up. Until that time, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
That was really funny.
Something's gotta give, something's gotta give.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we're back. That's the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show. All of the folks out there that are listening, we want to thank you for tuning in. Every show we want to make sure we give a shout out to our awesome sponsors who really help make this show a possibility for us. And so on that note, we want to mention the big sponsors for our shows, Guillen Homes. We love those guys. Just had them on last week. They build a fantastic product. Look for their stuff around town. Prudential Anderson Properties. Good guys. Rob is doing a dance over here on it. Danny, too.
And Danny, too.
Yes, also great sponsors for the show. We've got One Guard Home Warranties, Jason Jimenez Insurance Agency, Belco Carpet Cleaning, and Chrysalis Managed Service Providers. All those guys make this show a great possibility.
Let's not forget Willow Bend Mortgage.
Willow Bend Mortgage. Improve My Credit
Improve
USA.
My Credit USA. That is correct. We all work in conjunction with you there.
The list goes on and on. Let me stop you right there, Chris, because at my age, if I don't get the question out, I'm going to forget in about 20 seconds.
I understand. 21's young.
We're talking with Jeremy Conaway, who is a world-class strategist, and we've been talking on the breaks and earlier this morning about trends in the country. And I often talk with realtors when they're working with their clients. So people aren't buying houses, they're buying lifestyles. Why don't you address what you're seeing out there throughout the country?
Well, again, the lawyer always requires the foundation to be laid down. And think about when we first did this, we wanted homes that were proximate to where we were going to grow crops and have our food. Then we wanted to be safe. But when the boomers came around in the mid-'70s and started buying, they wanted status. They wanted to be where all the cool people are. What's happening today, it's amazing, and that is that the smart consumer is saying, okay, my move means I'm going to create a new lifestyle. So it's sort of like they bring this fresh canvas in, and they say, okay, what do I want from this lifestyle? When they look at a particular property, they look at things like not how many miles is it from where I work, how many minutes is it, how much time a day am I going to invest in that, how close is the sports facilities, how walkable, what kind of life will my kids have in it, who might the neighbors be, and what magazines do they take, and all sorts of things. So we've got this new art form, and that is purchasing a home is now part of a greater process called creating a new lifestyle. And it's really exciting, and some people are just absolutely thinking about all the things. So when you're done with the closing, you now are free to create and live this new lifestyle. And it's amazing the differences you can make if you make the right decisions. 15 minutes less driving converted into a yearly, hourly time spent with your kids, with your family, or with your special interest is huge. So the whole considerations, but lifestyle planning has become a really exciting skill set.
Yeah, I noticed that most of the developers now, when they do a new development, I'm thinking out there in Fulshire, which is a very extended distance from Houston, but people will opt to be out there because once they're out there, either maybe equestrian, they're enjoying some of the small lakes and things like that. They're okay with the distance, but when they get home, they're kind of in their environment. Is that what you're seeing that across the country?
Well, they've gone through a transformation. From when they left the office to when they got home, they've gone from being an executive or an administrative, whatever, and when they get home, they jump out and they are an equestrian. And I guess the difference is the boomer generation lived to work, and what we're seeing now are people who are working to live.
And one of the things, though, I think that has driven this, if you look at where we stand, and I'm using Houston as a reference, right? You look at the Memorial area. and then all of a sudden you start growing out and you go out to Spring Shadows, and all of a sudden you grow out and you go out to Lakes and Alders North, then you grow out even further. I'm just going the west side. Then you go out to Katy, right? And you go to Cinco Ranch, and now you talk about Cross Creek. What has happened is that lifestyle change you've seen in the past 20 years, the developers are creating that lifestyle
Sure they
change.
are.
You know, they are creating amenities that we have never seen, and that's why people are also moving out so far, because of those amenities that are being developed that we have never seen on the inner loop or on the inner city side of things.
You know, there's this app on the iPad called Walk Score. And I have a lot of clients that come with this, and may work downtown or they may work in the energy corridor. But wherever they live, they still pull up this application called Walk Score, and they want to see how walkable their neighborhood is. Where can they go? How close is the nearest Starbucks? Where's the grocery store? All of that stuff comes into factor where they live, because where they work and where they live is they want them separated, and they are absolutely wanting those amenities close to them where they live, not necessarily where they work.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. And people, you go to communities like Chicago, around Chicago, and they're called bedroom communities because the boomers just wanted to get out of the office and go sleep so they could come back to work. And now what you're seeing is city center neighborhoods where people are creating, because people say, I don't want to live in a bedroom community. I want to live where there's clubs and things to do and places to go. So now you're seeing this sort of city center thing, because people's lifestyles are not about bedrooms. They're about all the things there are to do.
And you see that happening at our city center that's right over there at I-10 in the Beltway.
Right.
They have city center. You can actually live, eat, work right in that location, not even have to get into a car.
You know, and technology's done a lot to this as well. It used to be the big thing was you had to live close to work because technology wasn't what it was today. You didn't have internet access and hotspots and cell phones, etc. Guess what? Nowadays, most individuals out there at least work 1 day a week from their home. So they don't really care about being as close to the office as possible, because they can remote in from wherever they need to be. They can get on a conference call via Skype. They can access all their data via the internet. They can get on the cell phone. And so we're seeing that lifestyle change, as you mentioned before. Moving out is, this is my life, this is my work. If I need to put them both together, I can. But we're seeing a lot of positive change.
Now, Jeremy, are you seeing it around the country? Are you seeing where people are coming back to the cities? We have that suburban sprawl. Of course, in Houston we do, because we need more houses. We just keep going further every direction. But you get areas like Chicago, San Francisco, and those areas, there's no place to go. Are they pulling back in and they're creating these amenities? Or what do you see?
Well, they are. And, of course, that's causing some gentrification and things like that. We're causing some major social issues. But it's sufficient to say that if you're 40 years old today, you want to be in the middle of it. You want to be having an adventure. You want to have those options. One of my favorite places, I spent a lot of time in Vancouver, British Columbia. Sort of, in my mind, the ultimate live there, work there, play there. On Saturday morning, if we were right now sitting looking down from the 12th floor into Vancouver, we'd see people sailing and rowing and running and bicycling and having flea markets and having all kinds of... The entire community is out on the street on Saturday morning, and all they had to do was go down the elevator.
Well, they just thawed out, so they've got to do something.
Well, Vancouver's not quite as bad as some other areas of Canada.
But you know, Rob, it's not a bad segue to talk about two things. Number one, look what's going on in Houston. You look at the Heights, you look at Rice Military, you look at Bel Air and Meyerland. You're seeing all the redevelopment going on in there, and this leads to next week. We're going to be actually talking about all this on next week's show, so it's a great show to talk about. But you don't have to go that far away to look and see what's going in as far as redevelopment, even within Houston. You have a lot of people who are still moving out, but you have a lot of people that are also redeveloping and coming back in.
And the lifestyle for Inside the Loop, of course, is access to restaurants, entertainment, and things like that.
Cigar
bars. And the lifestyle in the areas in the Cross Creek Ranch areas, again, they're having lakes, trails, equestrian centers. There is just two different lifestyle choices, actually.
You know, we just ran some new stats from HAR showing what the hottest areas were in the greater Houston market. And all of Houston's really doing well, but there's some areas that really stand out. That area right there around 610 and 290, where that all comes together. The inner northwest area, it's up 350% over what it was a couple of years ago. How we really measure that is the number of pendings to the number of sale. How many houses are coming on the market? And the pendings are outperforming the coming on the market 10-1 in some of these areas. And we need you to sell your house. We need inventory.
We plead every week
to sell.
And let me tell the average consumer out there one thing. And we have Danny Frank here, chairman of HAR. The best app in the world for your iPad or iPhone, and I will tell you this, Danny, and it is absolutely phenomenal, is the HAR app on the iPad.
We've
it
worked
is
on that
absolutely
for a long
phenomenal.
time.
Or for the Droid.
For the Droid. I will tell you, and for all those out there, if you don't have this and you are in the real estate market and you are looking, it's one of the best apps that you can put on your unit whether it be your iPad or your Droid or your iPhone or where it needs to be, and utilize. It has everything you need to do to assist your realtor. Hopefully you're picking the phone and calling a realtor, number one, but to assist your realtor in finding out and showing them and working with them and finding that home for you.
Let's talk about using a realtor for a second. There's a couple scams going around Houston, also around the United States right now, and they all have to do with people buying property without using a realtor. There's people trying to sell their stuff on Craigslist or what have you, and people just don't wire the money to somebody in Africa. Just don't do it. Your rich uncle didn't really pass away and you didn't win the lottery, and I promise you, if a house is selling for $1,200 everywhere else, and the next one next door to it is only $600, and you have to wire the money directly, it's not a real deal. Hire a realtor. The realtor is not going to cost you any money. The seller, 99% of the time, pays for the commission of the real estate agent that you're going to use. So hire a realtor to help you find your home, whether you're renting or buying.
And, and I want to talk about that as well. It's not only about assisting you in finding the home, which is a big part of it, but it's all the other nuances in the transaction. Most people don't realize it's about ensuring that your mortgage is done correctly. It's about ensuring that you have the correct inspection. It's about renegotiating if that inspection comes about. It's about understanding how they can help the appraiser get the value if required right there. There's a lot of other aspects. It's the negotiation, the contract portion, the arbitration. There's a lot of other aspects that go in to being a realtor that they can advise you on and assist you in that process. It's not just about, and this is what I hear too often, what I say is, I can find a home right on the internet. Yes, you can, but there's a lot of other aspects of the transaction that you're not versed to do that a realtor can help you with.
Yeah, I have one catch-all phrase. You can get the information, but you can't get the experience.
Right. Well, here's a plug for a show 2 weeks away. What you don't know will hurt you, right? That's a show topic that's coming up in 2 weeks. But that's absolutely the case. I was talking to someone recently, and just a little credit industry plug here, but he said, why should I pay somebody to do this? Can't I do this myself? Absolutely. Absolutely. I said, first of all, you're just paying me to be frustrated. That's it. I'm being frustrated on your behalf. I know how to mow the yard. I don't mow my yard because it's hot. I have somebody else do it, right? Same thing with the selling the house process. Can you do it yourself? Absolutely you can. And especially in today's society, man, it's an information age. Hop on the internet. You can do all kind of research and all that sort of thing, but you don't know what you don't know. And that's the part that's the rub.
And it all goes well until something doesn't go well. And now, by the way, it's not only are you careening off the roadway, but you don't have anybody to turn to. And by the time you find somebody, it's too late.
Whereas now you have nobody to blame.
Yes.
Except that person in the mirror in the morning.
And the scary part is that you might be careening off the road and don't even know that you're careening off the road until the car comes to a tragic stop.
And you're on TV.
Yeah.
This is radio. We're not supposed to talk about that.
Well, the great thing about radio, they can't see us, right? We all got great faces for
Well, we're coming
radio.
up on a break. We have a ton of expertise in the room, folks. If you want to know about what's going on in the real estate market in Houston, be sure to give us a call, 800-808-5548, and we'll be right back.
Dozen roses too, then let it rise for 100 years or two, and that's a recipe for making love. It doesn't need sugar.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. Man, we are having a good time in the studio this morning. It has been a great show so far. What do you think, Rob?
Well, I'm having a great time. How about Joe? Are you having a good time over there? Or we woke him up again. He's over there on Facebook, commenting. we like to catch him off guard. And the one thing is that we are totally unscripted, and oftentimes it's obvious by that pregnant lull we had at one point. We were talking on the break with Jeremy, and we have been developing, and Jeremy has been a huge architect in what HAR.com has become and was in the beginning, and I've been there since the genesis of that. So let's talk briefly about what that means to consumers.
Well, first of all, the worst thing in the world is to miss when someone throws you a party and you don't show up. And so what's happening right now is that the consumers made it clear they want unlimited access to information. And so what again, you talk about what makes Houston an amazing real estate market. Well, the entirety of the United States is currently competing over Realtor.com, Trulia, Red, and Zillow. And what's interesting is they're all sharing that. But Houston is the only community in the United States that has its own. And so one of the things you want to observe about these internet-based, what they're called portals, is that they are working overtime to create an amazing show for you. And the Houston real estate market is the only market in the United States that has its own show. Taki and the gang at HAR and Bob Hale, it's amazing. And we have the chairman, Danny Frank, who, by the way, before he was the chairman, has been really engaged in the development of HAR.com. But the point is, don't go out there any chance you get, because there's a change going on all the time, because the race here is to create a great show for today's consumer. And there are some amazing things going on out there. And it's not a technical thing anymore. It's literally, it's almost entertainment. It's an experience, and it's wonderful. And today's consumer has the full benefit of that, something that no consumer's ever had in 200 years of real estate.
I go to, and I know you've seen this in other markets. You go to smaller markets or markets who have not matured or changed the way they've done business, and they say, I want to hang on to the information. We want to keep that information. And we recognize early on, consumers can get the information. They're gonna get the information.
They are getting it.
They're getting it.
And we should be the premier source for it. That's really what we have to mind. What we can do for you, the consumer out there, to give you what it is you want. And Danny's real versed on that.
Let's look at the big portals in Houston, Texas for real estate. You have HAR.com's number one. You have Zillow, Trulia, and you have Realtor.com. So let's look at everything other than HAR.com, because 99% of all the data they have comes from HAR. So why would you go to any other source other than HAR.com to get real estate information? Because the information is the most accurate, most on time, and most believable, and most accurate all the time. It's updated every 15 minutes on HAR.com. You go to Zillow, Trulia, they update, at best once an hour, at best, and some of them only do it once every 24 hours.
Well, the other problem is that the process by which it's called syndication, and one of the industry's issues right now is that what HR.com has is sort of like the pure stuff, and then the syndication process, through 1,000 ways it would take us another day just to talk about, has a way of disqualifying the data. So by the time it gets to those other places, remember that commercial, New York City? Well, in this case, it's like Seattle, Washington. Why would you have data from there? So the problem is the further the data goes, even though you say it's instantaneous, Jeremy, come on. No, interesting enough, it's not instantaneous. The pure stuff is sitting on HR.com, but by the time it migrates to these other places, for 1,000 reasons, it gets not pure.
Well, yeah, I'm just glad you haven't gone to a Zestimate on the HAR.com. Well, can't stand those things.
They're not, because Texas is a non-disclosure state. Right. So if you go to Zillow and try to find out what a Zestimate is, it's based off of tax data. Yes. Tax data has no correlation to the price of value of a home.
That is, and let's talk about that, because that's one thing most people don't realize. Is a lot of times individuals are out there and they say, well, the tax data on this property is XYZ. Or conversely, individuals don't want to contest their taxes because there's a fear that's going to impact their market value. And they describe to our listeners, those are not a correlation to each other.
Well, it's actually, there's a state statute that states that the Harris County Taxing Authority or the Missouri County or wherever county you're in, the CAD, cannot use sold data to correlate their own pricing matrix. They have to come up with their own valuation of your house on their own. And being a licensed arbitrator in the state of Texas as I am, those prices have no correlation to what a house may be worth today. None, because they have to find their own value by themselves. And all that value is just a way to find a value so they can tax you on the value of that house. It has no correlation with what the house may be worth. I think the state legislature says it has to be plus or minus 15%. That's a huge swing.
Huge swing right there. Yeah. And and the reason why I just want to bring that up, because so oftentimes individuals want to negotiate based on a wrong data, right?
Right.
And that's the exact data that I don't like on some of those national levels that we talk about, is the data they're putting in is based upon those taxing authorities, which is inaccurate data half the time to begin with anyway.
And I go back to my old adage, hire a realtor.
Absolutely. And actually, before we send any kind of data to Zillow, we made them put a disclaimer on there. If you want to get accurate information, contact a realtor, because we have the pure data. They have an algorithm that actually extrapolates based on tax data, and oftentimes that's not even accurate. So, Jeremy, again, you're the eyes of the rest of the country and stuff. When you go to other markets, and what do people do to combat bad information off of websites?
Well, Frankly, they don't. Frankly, well, no. I mean, the number one thing is first they suffer the consequences of bad data, and they discover that had they used a realtor, they might have gotten that screen and they might have gotten that straight, but they would have gotten the perspective. So again, I pride myself on being one of these new consumers, and I watch my 26-year-old son, who's really one of these consumers, and to try to point out there's just no substitute for that local professional experience screen. And even if it's some stupid little things you might have thought had nothing to do with it, you look at schools now, just the little score differences between school A and school B, and projecting that, what that means with your kids moving down the road, you might have dropped that subtlety. A 5% loss of acuity in this search process can have huge ramifications.
Absolutely. And the other thing about the little nuances things, and that's why I always encourage realtors to work in the communities that they are experts in, because you can cross the street.
Yes.
And there can be a disparity of 100,000. If you go to River Oaks, you cross the street, you can be a $500,000 difference. But, an algorithm's not going to pick that up, and someone coming from another area is not going to pick that up. There's no way.
I see agents advertising here in the Houston market on these different portals. They're from Dallas, they're from Wichita Falls, they're from El Paso, advertising here in Houston, trying to find leads for buyers, and just because they give it to them for a low-cost service doesn't mean it's going to be great service. It's usually not going to be service. Hire a local realtor.
Absolutely, because they know the market.
And what you're beginning to see, by the way, it's not just local. It's now gotten down to sub-local. It's now gotten down to neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
I mean, you want somebody who has dealt in a particular neighborhood and understands the nuances of that neighborhood, because those are going to make the side of the street that the sun comes up can make a difference.
I actually asked realtor that when they said they're the local expert. I said, okay, tell me how many houses are in inventory in your area right now, or even the neighborhood you work. And if they can't answer that, I know they're not the experts.
No, but I think we got to go back to settle this down. And we're still saying to consumers, you've got to be a player in this thing. There's got to be informational parity for you. You've got to do your research. You've got to move into this professional relationship on an equality information basis. You can't move in and say, well, what do you think? You really have to know where you are. I mean, today it's just too important. So you got to do your homework.
I love working with the local consumer. I remember the first time I sold somebody that you would consider the X generation, and I ended up showing him like 5 places. He had already done all his research, knew what he wanted, knew what the prices should be, and I'm going, wow, this is an amazingly informed consumer. He still needed us to get him through the process, but they had a lot of great information.
Right.
And so I thoroughly enjoy the fact that they've got a lot of information.
I've got a funny, it seems like it has nothing to do with the story, but I think it makes a great point. There was
nice to him.
2 minutes. Okay, there was a great little study done where they had a guy go into a subway, and he played violin, and they just filmed it and watched people pass by, right? And randomly people would throw money in, but they didn't slow down. They just kept going. The person who paid the most attention was a 3-year-old, and the mom had to yank him along, to get him to keep going, right? What nobody knew was this guy was a world-famous concert violinist. He was playing on a $3.5 million violin and had played one of the most complicated pieces in the world that he had played the night before at a sold-out symphony where the cheapest seat was $100 a pop, right? Now, the point of the experiment was to see if people recognize beauty or talent, all these sort of things out of context, right? And that they don't. They pass by it, right? And tying this all back together to the point here of using a local expert in an area. Even a professional who is not an expert in an area but just generally familiar with the area can overlook a quality or a value that a local expert doesn't see. You don't know what you don't know, and it can hurt you.
That's right, and which is a segue to a show 2 weeks from today.
That's right. How'd you like that crazy story tie-in?
Are we bringing the violinist in?
Yeah. Jeremy, we're kind of getting to the point we're going to be wrapping up stuff. What would you like consumers to know about either the Houston market or markets in general?
Again, working all across North America, I guess, just to be sort of glib about it, I'd say, you know what? Good morning. You just woke up in one of the best real estate markets in the country. Take advantage of it.
And he is unpaid for that comment, by the way.
Yes.
Well, I was a Diet Coke involved.
Okay.
And Danny, what would you say?
Kolache.
I say,
Oh, now he brings it up.
guys, if you're on the fence and ready to sell your house, now is the time to pull the trigger. There's not a better market. We're kind of in a quandrum because there's not enough houses for people to buy. We have more buyers than we do sellers, but people won't sell their house till there's houses to buy, but need people to sell their houses so we can have houses to buy. So it's kind of a vicious circle, and we're in that gerbil cage running as fast as we can, and we're trying to get more houses. now's the time to sell your house because you'll get top dollar for
I'm
it.
picturing Danny on that treadmill.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Here, Guillen Homes can love us for this one, right? So
Yeah, they can. We need inventory,
right?
guys.
Sell your house, move to a new Guillen home. That way, some old inventory will open up, some new inventory will sell, and everybody will be happy.
Absolutely.
I would absolutely agree. It's always a lot of fun being here on the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. We are going to be running out of time in this segment. As always, give all of our experts a call. Look us up on realestateratpack.com or go out to Facebook. Give us a like on Facebook, Real Estate Rat Pack Show. For all those listening, stay tuned next week. Have a great day.
And you've been listening to the Real Estate Rat Pack. The question is, who's Frank, who's Sammy, who's Dean, and who's the other guy?
Chris is Frank,
I'm
he's
Dean.
Dean, and I'm Sammy.
Yes, is that right? Yeah.
So tune in to the really big show every Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on 100.7 The Word, KKHT.